Hi, in this tutorial you're going to learn how to create your first web page using HTML5. Now to begin with, no special software is needed in order to create a web page. All you need is a text editor. My examples and demonstrations will be using TextEdit, which is available on the Mac operating system. You can also use something like Notepad if you're working on Windows. And there's no difference in any of the coding that's used. HTML is platform independent, so it can be used on any operating system. So first we're going to create an HTML5 template, and this will be the code that you can use for creating every HTML document in your website. So you could create it and save it as a separate file and then just copy and paste it every time you start a new file, or you can hand type it. It doesn't take that long. So first of all, I'm going to put the code in, and then we'll go through each of the sections and their meaning. So all of your HTML documents will start with what's called a doc type declaration. So it's doc type HTML, and they're enclosed inside the less than, greater than symbols. Next we have the opening HTML tag, and we specify in there the language that this page is using. So this is using English, and so the two-letter code for that is EN. Then we have the head section of our document, and within the head section contains other types of content. One of them is the title of the page. Now I'm tabbing over just to kind of break it up and make it a little easier for reading. So let's just say page title goes here. And then we have a closing title tag. Something that you're going to see a lot as we work in HTML is tags. You've already seen 4 different ones. We have the doc type declaration inside less than, greater than symbols, the opening HTML tag inside the greater than, less than, head tag, and now the title tag. So you can see that these are starting to designate or mark up your document, and what happens is your browser interprets this code in order to display your web page. So this is what's called an opening tag, right? This is the beginning, and then this is a closing tag, and the closing tag looks exactly like the beginning one for the title, except it has a / in here. So the browser will recognize this as the web page title, and we'll take a look as we review this in the browser as to what that title, where it appears, and what it can do for your pages. But it's important to always include a title on your page. The next thing we're going to put in is a meta tag, and in this we specify the character set that we're going to be using, and this is UTF-8. And that's the end of our head section, so I'm going to put in a closing head tag. So you can see here that the elements in the head section are enclosed within an opening and closing head tag. The next part of our document is called the body. And so our content of our web page goes here. So I'm just going to put in content goes here. And then we have a closing body tag. So everything that displays in our web page is contained within the opening and closing body tag. And then we have a closing HTML tag. So this is just a basic structure of an HTML5 document. Now to just go over in a little bit more detail what these things are. Okay, this first line is our doc type declaration, or also called the document type definition. Now the World Wide Web Consortium, or the W3C, is the recommending body that identifies standards for web page markup languages. So this doc type declaration is specifying that it's going to adhere to the rules and the regulations of an HTML5 document. So that's what this declaration does. It's just declaring that this is going to be an HTML5 style document. Next we have an opening HTML tag, and this is saying, okay, our document is going to be written in HTML. So this is the opening tag, and then this is the closing HTML tag. So most of our tags, there'll be a few that don't, but most of them will have an opening and a closing. So our opening HTML tag also has what's called an attribute in here, some additional information that our tag can use. And basically this is telling the browser that the language of this web page is in English, so it can expect English language content to be displayed. The next part of our document is the head section. So we have an opening and closing head tag. And if you think of it in terms of the way your physical body is, you know, the head is at the top. The head is what does the thinking. It tells the body what to do and how to interpret things. Well, the kind of content that you get in the head section tells the browser how to interpret and deal with the rest of the content that's coming in the body. So to begin with, we just have a title tag in here, and then we also have what's called a meta tag. Now a meta means information. It's information about information. And our browser is going to use this meta tag in order to describe some characteristic of the web page. And in this case, it's describing what type of character encoding is to be used. So character encoding is the representation of letters and numbers and symbols in your file, and also describes how the information should be transmitted over the internet. And it's common to use a character encoding set that is widely supported, and one of those is UTF-8, which is a form of Unicode. Now this doesn't have an opening and a closing tag. You can see it's all self-contained in one. We don't have a closing meta tag. So it's considered to be a standalone or a self-contained tag. And that's because it's not marking up anything in between to say what kind of content it is. Whereas with the title tag, we're saying, okay, this is the beginning of the title information, and this is the end of the title information. And what's in between is the title. Meta tag is standalone. It doesn't have a closing because it's not formatting or marking up any content inside a container. Now these are not the only elements that will go inside the head section. As you'll see later, we'll be able to add some style information. You'll often have JavaScript or some kind of scripting language embedded in here. So you'll see other things added in here as you go through developing and learning to create websites. Next is the body section. And as we said, the body section contains the information that's going to display on the web page in your web browser. So anything that you want to display on the page should be within the opening and closing body tags. And this is where you'll probably spend most of your time writing in your code. And then at the end we have the closing HTML tag, which closes this opening HTML tag. So next, let's save this and then preview it in your browser. So depending on if you're working in Windows, you would do File and Save. If you're in the Mac, you could do File and Save, or the keyboard shortcut for your particular operating system. Now when you're saving your file, I recommend that you create a folder and start to keep all of your files for one particular website project in that file. It'll make it easier when you're developing because all of your pages and all of your images and anything that has to do with that website is all within one folder location. So I've created a folder on my desktop called Devin Ann Photo, and I'm going to change my file name to index.html. Now some things about saving your files. These are really, really important, so pay close attention to this. When you're naming your files, you should come up with a naming convention, because what happens is your web pages are case sensitive. The names of your files will become case sensitive once you upload them to your web server. So most Windows and Mac machines are not case sensitive when it comes to the names of their files. But once you upload them to a web server, a good portion of the web servers in use are Unix machines, and Unix file names are case sensitive. So what that means is if I call this index with a capital I, on the web server, that is a completely different file than if I had index with a little I. Also, when you're naming your files, I would recommend not using spaces. Some servers may have problems with spaces in your file names, and it also makes it easier for you when you're trying to encode links to go from one page to another to not have to worry about spaces. So if you're going to capitalize anything in your file names, you'll have to remember that you capitalized something, especially when you're going to link to it, because the links that we create from one page to another will be case sensitive because the file names on your web server will be case sensitive. So really important concept, because what will happen is if you don't worry about this now, things will probably work okay on your local computer, but once you load your files up to a web server, then things start to fall apart because they are usually going to be case sensitive on a server. Now I'm naming this file index because when you go to a website and you're typing in the URL to get there, the first page the server will default to show you is the index page. So let me show you an example. If we go to a website called devonannphotography.com, and this is part of a website that I'm going to be developing over this series of tutorials on YouTube. So when I go to her website, I type in devonannphotography.com, and you'll notice that there are no file names after this. By default, it is showing me an index page. So I didn't have to type in the name of a page in order to get here. So if I named it something else, like if I called it home or I called it main, then what the user would have to do would be to type in the name of the file, so they'd have to type in main.html. By creating your first or your home page file as index, the web server is automatically going to serve up that index page. So I'm going to start off my home page as index.html, and I'm going to save it to a folder where all of the files for my website are going to be saved. And so if you're using Windows, of course, yours is going to look a little different in here in navigating to the folder where you're going to save your files. So I'm going to click Save, and on Mac it double checks to make sure that I really want to use HTML. You probably don't get that in Windows. Okay, so now I've saved my file, and what I want to do is open up my page in my browser and take a look at it. So I have a folder here that I'm using to put all of my files in for my website. So if I open that up, you can see that I have my index.html page, and I'm going to right click on it and choose Open With, and I can choose my browser that I want to open it in. If you have a default browser that you use, you'll see a little icon there that shows you the icon for the browser that's set for your system. So you could double click on that to open it up. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to double click. Okay, and you can see I'm going to close out this other page so we just have this one. And it has page title goes here. So this is the title that's in our HTML. All right, so I'm going to put these up here side by side so that you can see how they correlate to each other. And you can see the title here and the title at the top of our browser. Now, depending on your web browser, it will look a little different. The other place the title shows up is if you have a tab bar. Let me open up another tab that is just a plain tab, and you can see where the title shows up if you're using tab navigation. So if the user has multiple tabs open, which isn't uncommon these days, they're able to get back to your page easily because you've left them an informational title here so that they can pick this one out as opposed to another tab that they have open. So that's an overview of how to create an HTML5 template. Look for future videos on how to expand on adding content in here and formatting it.